If Demarcus Cousins is your favorite NBA player, well, you're in luck because in this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the biggest fights and ejections that Demarcus Cousins was involved in throughout his time in the NBA. Now, if anybody had the privilege of watching Cousins during the early stages of his career with the Kings, you'd know that he got himself into far too many fights and was actually leading the league in technical fouls at one point. But even though he often let his emotions get the best of him, Cousins remained a force in the league and was considered the best center in the NBA for quite a while. This first clip happens to be in the early days of his NBA career when he was still a member of the Sacramento Kings. The team was getting smacked around by the Boston Celtics in this particular matchup, and frustration started to get the best of him. Boston held a 21-point lead with just over 7 minutes remaining in the game, and it was just about time to wrap it up and go home. Cousins set an offensive screen for his teammate to try and spring him open, but ended up getting wrapped around the defender that was guarding his teammate. That defender happened to be Marcus Smart, one of the scrappiest players in the league, so you already know that the two of them would have started to get into a fight, but the fight didn't start at the screen, it just kind of intensified things a little bit. That exact same possession, Smart just happened to be standing in front of Cousins as the ball bounced off the rim, so Smart did all he could to box out Cousins on the perimeter, and he was not happy about it. Before you knew it, Cousins literally flipped Smart onto the ground, with the refs and players all sprinting over to separate the two before it got any worse than it already was. Smart was luckily not able to get a swing or a shove in, but was still punished with a technical foul, the same punishment that Cousins faced, though it wouldn't have been that big of a punishment if he didn't already have a technical foul to his name during that game, so this fight ended up getting him ejected. And that's just like what happened in this next clip. The Kings were once again trailing big time, but instead of playing the Celtics, they were up against the Houston Rockets. The second half had just begun, and the Rockets held a 19-point lead. Dwight Howard drove to the rim to try and pick up 2 points, but a whistle was blown while he was going up. The ref called for a foul on Cousins, but Cousins clearly disagreed with the call and was visibly upset. Howard ended up knocking down the first free throw, and Cousins could be seen talking to himself and arguing with the official a little bit longer before he was randomly handed a technical foul from the ref. A few teammates actually had to get him to sit down on the bench at first, while the team's head coach yelled at the ref for such a random call that didn't really make much sense. But Cousins just couldn't be contained much longer than that. He bolted up out of his seat while their coach was still talking to the ref, and he had to get restrained by other staff members and players to avoid him literally assaulting the official. The referee just stood there and ignored him at first, before finally handing him a second technical and ejecting him from the game. Now, if you thought he was mad before, then this is a whole different level. He started screaming at the ref, and from what the camera saw, it looked like he wanted to charge at the referee for the call and had to be held off the court. Thankfully, Cousins didn't always have to be that restrained, exactly like what happened during this game between the Kings and the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis at this time was still a really talented team, with Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, and Marc Gasol to keep them competitive. Gasol kicked this play off with an incredible pass in the paint to a cutting Randolph, who was then able to go up for 2 free points as DeMarcus soared over the top of him trying to block it. The ball came back near the two of them, and Cousins looked like he smacked the ball away from Randolph as he tried to grab it for whatever reason. But when Cousins tried to walk away, Randolph wasn't having any of it. Instead, he got all up in his face and started walking with him while the two were arguing. This resulted in a small shove from Cousins to get Randolph out of his face, while refs and other teammates stepped in to break up the two before it could escalate. It's rare, but for once, Cousins wasn't the one being held back during a fight. Unlike in this clip during the 2014 FIBA Basketball World Cup semifinals. Team USA was locked in a close game against Lithuania. The score was 40-32 with just under 2 minutes to go in the first half, with Team USA in the lead at the time. One of the Lithuanian players was able to knock down a free throw, and a teammate of his happened to be Jonas Valanciunas, the now center for the Memphis Grizzlies. He was lined up right next to Demarcus Cousins for this free throw, and when the ball dropped through, each of them quickly tried to box the other out, though it resulted in Valanciunas accidentally throwing an elbow at the face of Cousins. As you'd expect, Cousins did not take that lightly. He literally took a few charging steps towards Valanciunas, and to everyone watching, it really seemed like he was going to flat out deck Jonas for what had just happened. Luckily, he stopped about a few inches away from him and never actually swung, but he looked to be so mad and serious that everybody ran over as fast as they could to stop the situation. The whole situation ended up being pretty lucky. Valanciunas didn't hit him intentionally, and Cousins didn't retaliate with a thunderous punch while he wasn't looking. Though at first glance, Everybody thought that was what was going to happen. Even Valanciunas, he ducked the second he caught Demarcus out of the corner of his eye. But either way, the two were eventually separated and they each had some time to cool off and get ready for the rest of the first half without any problems. Now, for some reason, Cousins has had a lot of fights with members of the Boston Celtics, and this one was no different. The Kings were up by a score of 46-39 with about a minute and a half remaining in the first half of action. Cousins got the ball inside the three-point line and was about to post up Kevin Garnett. However, Garnett was able to get a hand on the ball while Cousins turned around and the ball went bouncing out of bounds. But Garnett didn't just let it roll out and restart the possession. Instead, he dove in front of Demarcus in an effort to save the ball before it went out, and unfortunately, he was too late. As usual, when somebody dives, a bunch of his teammates ran over to pick him up off the floor, but Cousins was just standing over him talking to him. That's when Rajon Rondo walked over to the pile and got right in between Garnett and Cousins. It was clear that Rondo said something to Cousins to try to make him back away, but Demarcus didn't move a muscle. Instead, he just stood there talking. Now this caused Rondo to shove Cousins out of the way, and he took a few steps back towards Rondo to start a small scuffle on the sidelines. There weren't any punches thrown and no other player was shoved after that, but the image of Cousins standing in the middle of multiple Celtics players yelling and arguing made it look like somebody was going to get punched or tackled. In the end, it subsided pretty quickly once other people got involved to break it up, and there wasn't much punishment dished out for this incident either. Only Rondo was handed a technical foul for the scuffle, but it was enough for the Sacramento head coach to bench his star player, at least until the end of the first half, in order for him to get his mind right and settle down. Which is exactly what he needed to do after this fight with a member of the Miami Heat. The Heat were up by 4 points with the game coming into the final minute of regulation. The Kings had the ball, and it didn't seem like they were able to get anything going on this possession. Two of the guards were just passing the ball between one another before chucking up a bad shot when the shot clock was about to expire. Cousins set a screen for that shot and had just started rolling to the rim to try and grab a rebound for the potential miss and was met with a hard bump from Mario Chalmers. This bump didn't seem like much when you slow the film down, but it was enough in real time to send Cousins spiraling to the floor. A foul was instantly called, and Chalmers started making his case to the officials that it wasn't a big deal, though Cousins got up off the floor and ran at Chalmers to try and get in his face. And if it wasn't for Chalmers already arguing with the referee, Cousins would have been able to get there. Instead, he was held by a few other teammates and officials and got walked away from the pile so he wouldn't make the situation worse. The game then went into an official review to go over what the punishment was actually going to be. It just wasn't clear who deserved to get the technical. On one hand, you have Cousins getting bumped to the ground by Chalmers, but then you have Cousins running over and yelling at Chalmers and instigating a fight even more. It was a tricky situation, but luckily it was able to get all sorted out and nobody ended up getting themselves suspended over something stupid. Want to watch more NBA fights? Then make sure to click on the video that appears now on your screen.